Yes, so look, I want to start asking about the greater glider, which was listed as vulnerable in May 2016, and forestry practices, amongst other factors, were identified as contributing to the species decline, in particular logging and the loss of hollow trees. So I just wanted to get your response of when new information like that becomes available and a species is listed, what processes then kick in terms of responding to that information?
Thank you, Senator. So you're correct that the species was listed in May 2016, and you're correct that the conservation advice that was approved at that time, which was the listing advice for the species, picked up on a range of threats, including forest operations throughout the range of the species. It's quite a wide-ranging species. As I understand it, under our regional forestry agreements, which are essentially led out of the Department of Agriculture, but those regional forestry agreements all have slightly differently worded but requirements for taking account of impacts on threatened species in their forestry prescriptions. So it essentially kicks into that side of the business of the federal government, if you like, which is around the regional forestry agreements.
So in terms of your department, and the environment and threatened species, so nothing kicks into place? Kicks into action.
When you say kicks in, Senator, so...
Well, you've got a listed species that's being listed as vulnerable, and your department's responsible for threatened species overall.
Yep. So, as I mentioned in an earlier answer to about a different species, when a species is listed as threatened, as this one was in 2016, it then becomes part of our regulatory system, so regulating significant impacts, referrals, assessments, condition setting, offsets, whatever it might be. But it also kicks into targets for investment programs. So threatened species recovery programs this would be part of the targets, or one of the targets for those investment programs. And the actions set out in the conservation advice, in the case of this species, would then inform the assessment of projects that we might receive for funding.
Right. So is that from your department's perspective that information is processed in terms of making recommendations for funding through the threatened species programs?
Through our investment programs, Senator, as a matter of national environmental significance, this species gets added to all of the species, the ecological communities, migratory species,
etc. So can you tell me, has there been any actions that have been taken regarding to the greater glider since it was listed as vulnerable in May 2016?
In terms of funding, Senator?
Any actions at all?
So I'd have to refer to my colleagues in the environmental assessments area, Environment Standards Division, who regulate actions, noting that actions taken consistent with RFAs are not referable. They're essentially exempt from the EPBC Act, so we'd be talking about actions outside of RFA areas that might or might not be referred.
Right.
I'm not aware of any of those, Senator, but it's not my part of the business of the department.
Senator, and if you're interested in funding, I think under Outcome 1.1, the Threatened Species Commissioner may be able to provide some information on that, and if not, we can certainly take that on notice and get back to you.
So as far as you are aware, though, so we might get some information from the Threatened Species Commissioner, but you're not aware of any other action that's been triggered by the greater glider having been listed?
So at the time this species was listed, Senator, there was a decision made to commence the preparation of a recovery plan. I don't have close line of sight on how that's going or what discussions have taken place, but there will be a group of people that are essentially inputting to that recovery plan. There may well be actions by, participants in that process, but
that's run by the Department of Agriculture under an RFA?
No, Senator. So the preparation of a recovery plan is under the Department of the Environment and Energy, but we engage with our state colleagues. Of course, for this species, we're talking about at least 3 states, maybe 4, and with local communities, on-ground actors, etc., community groups.
So
as they're identified.
Can you then share with me where things are at with the development of a recovery plan?
I'd have to take it on notice, Senator. It was only listed in 2016. There's a 3-year window to prepare a recovery plan with a possibility of extension, and I haven't got in front of me where that plan's actually up to.
Senator, just because there's a potential that this deals with if there have been any projects which have triggered the greater glider is one of the things that's assessed under the EPBC Act. If there's questions also around whether we provided funding for the greater glider, and then finally any of the other regulatory actions like the development of a recovery plan. I think maybe just to give you as comprehensive an answer as possible, it does sound like we probably do need to come back on notice, but in all three of those categories, spending, regulatory, and then other measures that we're trying to put in place on the Greater Glider, so you've got a comprehensive response. We'll certainly try and answer what we can when the Threatened Species Commissioner is here in terms of the spending side of things, but it does sound like you're looking for the full suite of actions.
Well, yes, I'm just wanting to know, I mean, given that it's now going on for 2 years, and yes, I note that there's 3 years to put a recovery plan into place, I want to know what actions have been triggered in the Department of the Environment in the almost 2 years since the species was listed. Okay, thank you. My other questions are regarding the hooded plovers on the southwest Victorian coast around Warrnambool, which we've covered at a number of estimate sessions over the last year. And that last time we were talking about it, we were awaiting a management plan from the Victorian government, which there's a management plan, a draft plan for the Belfast Coastal Reserve, which is where the hooded plovers is I'm not quite sure what their status. They're endangered, I think. Vulnerable, okay. Where they live. So how is the department engaging with the draft management plan that the Victorian government's released?
So, Senator, when this species was listed, which I believe was in 2014, the Conservation Advice prepared at the time of listing set out what the threats were to this species across its range. And as you point out, its range includes Victoria, but also includes South Australia and I believe Tasmania. Yes. And the threats are different in different areas. Some of the more common threats are around, dogs off leashes on beaches, disturbing nesting and chicks. And foxes predating on eggs, etc. And so the response, if you like, needs to be tailored for the particular area. So hence we very much encourage state governments, but also local communities and local government levels to actually come up with their own recovery or management plans, if you like, for the given beaches. This species is not getting a recovery plan, to make that point. So look, I don't have a lot of detail in front of me about individual actions at individual beaches, Senator. I can take that on notice, but we look at this species is one of the threatened species strategy species. So in that sense, it is a target again for investment programs, research, etc. There are research needs we have around this species and about how threats can be ameliorated. So we're encouraging those investments as well. And of course, it being a listed species, it again kicks into the environmental impact assessment process.
I mean, last estimates when we had this discussion, we came back to the assessment of the department that, the threat that I'm particularly concerned about is the commercial horse training activities. We had a number of interactions with Mr Knudsen, and that the individual horse riding activities as individual actions were unlikely to be notifiable actions under the EPBC Act. But that we were going to wait on the management plan. And so, Mr Knudsen, what you said last time is that the sense we got from the conversation with Victoria, they're getting close to releasing this management plan, and that will be important in dealing with the issue and its cumulative impacts. So we'll stay engaged on that basis. Yep. So now that plan's been released, I want to know how is that engagement going?
Sure. So, Senator, the staff that deal with the assessments of any projects in that space will be here shortly in the session, so they can deal with the specific questions that you have with respect to any of the horses on the beaches at that point. But I don't know whether Mr. Richardson's got anything to add with respect to the Victorian management plan and how that's.
I don't have that information here, Senator.
So, again, I think this sounds, again, just like we had on the previous species, something that you're looking for. What is the full range of actions that the department's doing, whether it's spending, whether it's regulatory or otherwise?
Well, it's basically whether the cumulative impacts of the horse training is considered a notifiable action under the EPBC Act. And now we've got a management plan that identifies that there are, as a proposal for a suite of horse training activities, sure. It sounds to me like it would have a cumulative impact.
Well, and again, the assessment teams will be here later on this afternoon. And
okay, so that's under 1.5.
All
right, I'll come back to it under 1.5.
Thank you.
Thank you.